All right, we are recording. So, welcome everybody. This is Just This. I think it's episode 53 or something crazy like that. So, we've been at this for over a year, if you can believe it. And we are going to be starting tonight on page 79. This is going to be the at one-ment section. So, before we dive in, is there any old business, anything from last week that you've been thinking about, bugging you, that you want to refute with all your might, ask questions about,
Did I miss a
comment on?
session? Because
What's that, Judy?
did you guys do the universal pattern already? I thought
We
I listened to the most recent. Um, I wasn't here last week, but
Yeah. Well,
I
no,
did
I
want
think
to
you're right.
focus.
We started page 78, universal pattern.
did I skip one?
Yeah.
Oh, I did skip one. Look at that. Look at
Oh, good.
man.
All right. I'm not
I am just
behind.
all right. Yes, you got to watch me every minute.
I've
Okay,
been
we're going to
juggling
start
a
on
few
page
plates.
78, the universal pattern. Um, yeah, let's just go. Let's just dive into it. See what happens here. The universal pattern, page 78. I believe that the Christian faith is saying that the pattern of transformation, the pattern that connects, is always death transformed, not death avoided. The universal spiritual pattern is death and resurrection, or loss and renewal, if you prefer. That is always a disappointment to humans because we want one without the other. Transformation without free choice or any surrendering to it. We ordinarily learn to submit and surrender to this scary pattern because reality demands it of us. Christians are helped by the fact that Jesus literally submitted to it and came out more than okay. So he is our guide, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, as the letter to the Hebrews puts it. Each time we surrender, each time we trust the dying, we are led to a deeper level. We are grounded for a while, like an electric wire, so there is less resistance and more available energy to trust it the next time. Yet it is still invariably a leap of faith, a walk through some degree of darkness. There is something essential that we only know by dying. We really don't know what life is until we know what death is. Divine life is so big, so deep, and so indestructible that it is able to include death. In fact, it must and does include death.
Wow.
Wow.
All right, so there's a couple of wows in there. Anything that really stood out? Anything you want to comment on initially?
I love that last sentence. The divine life is so big, so deep, and so indestructible that it is able to include death. And then the one above in the previous paragraph, each time we surrender, each time we trust the dying, we are led to a deeper level. Those are wows for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Any?
I also like the fact that for us to know how to live life well is to know that we're gonna die.
Wait, wait, say that again, dear.
To to appreciate or live life well is to know that we are gonna die. Our
Okay.
mortality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I also hear it too that we're not to avoid death if he's saying that. And so death is kind of a part of the big life that we have.
Mhm.
But that's kind of existential a little bit too. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no.
definitely. I was definitely hearing that too. And then like death, all in all, like death of the ego, death of the self is kind of a thing that came to my mind as I was reading it.
Okay. Is anyone having a problem with any of this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm afraid of dying still, but at the same time, I know that those moments when I have like released, just gave in to the pain or gave in to whatever it was and just let it happen. Um, whatever we resist persists. That's the only way that I was able to heal and get on the other side. But I still am afraid of the ultimate act of my body dying still. But like dying in life, I mean, pain and I don't know. I still have a aversion to it, but I understand like ultimately that's yeah, like when um what did Shakespeare say? Like something like when trees have lost all of their leaves and then a few have come back and after the fall and then the spring there's a few left. It's those few left that it has so much more meaning after you've lost everything and then you realize like
Mm.
there really is no light without night, there is no life without death. I mean, that totally makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot where I heard this, but this idea that every disappointment can be thought of as a mini death. Like every disappointment, every time we don't get what we want, we can allow that to remind us to kind of surrender the ego, like Sarah just alluded to, like it's a death of the ego, basically. If
Mhm.
we humble ourselves to it in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's definitely a surrender, right, William?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sarah, can you put your finger on what it is that you fear about death?
I think it's the unknown. I think it's just the it's the control. Like I want to know what exactly. I mean, I believe that I mean, knowing, having, I really do kind of coincide with the concept of the kingdom is here and now, and I've, you know, glanced at pieces of it and I love it. And to fully embrace it and become it is really exciting. But at the same time, I think it's just the fear of the unknown, really,
Mm.
Yep.
the
That's
doubt. What if I'm wrong?
Mhm.
What
yeah.
if you're right?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it this way: you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And if Christ is real, then we're in good shape. If it's not, then we're not going to know anyway,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So either there is or there isn't. But I get what you're saying. I think we all have that doubt, to an extent. And it's hard to deal with, but you just have to put your faith in what you believe and know
Mm.
what's going to happen, and then maybe it'll all come out really good.
Mm.
I don't think I think we're just going to pass because like go from this life to the next life right away, you know, because what Paul say, for me to die is the gain, with Christ, or to be present with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, if that's true, I mean, then like I said, we're in good shape.
Mm.
So I think Christ is eternal life insurance. That's how I look at it.
Is
Mm.
everybody else that sanguine about it? Or is there a little bit of
Well,
fear going on here?
yeah, I mean, I agree with Sarah. To me, too, it's the uncertainty. I don't know. I'd like to believe, but I don't know either. It's the uncertainty, but there's nothing I can do about it. But there's also another thing, another person I was listening to, and he said, "It's not that it's not that I'm happy to die. I'm not happy to die." He's saying, but I will die happy if I feel I have fulfillment or have fulfilled, my purpose in life. Not that I'm happy to die,
Mm.
but I will die happy
I'll die happy.
if there's, you know, fulfill my purpose or something like that.
Mm.
A while ago, I think for me, I had, when I was thinking about that question that you asked, Dave, I had a fear of missing out, of what I would be not able to see anymore. My grandkids grow up, get married, or what have you. And that still tugs at me sometimes. But
Mm.
I think the experiences I've had, of the presence of God in my life, has really calmed that that uncertainty. And and I keep, when the fear crops up periodically, I really embrace, and I think it's in Revelations. You feel free to, there'll be no more tears, no more can consume us here on earth. I think that alone gives me hope and reassurance that life is going to be wonderful, you know, even though I don't know what it's going to look like.
Mhm.
What's a glorified body? Who knows? I have no clue, but it sure sounds like it'll be a good place.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
So, I'm just to pick on Sarah a little bit more. When you said that you do fear death, would you say that your fear of death um, compromises your experience of your life, changes any decisions that you're making, or is it something kind of like Judy just alluded to, that every once in a while it crops up? How present is it to you? How salient is the word is it to you?
I mean, I don't think about it nonstop like every day. I go about my life, often it doesn't even come across my mind. It's usually in the, you know, the that that dark, when you're like falling asleep at night and you're alone and it's dark and it's like I don't know, that thought crosses my mind, like what if I don't wake up?
Hmm.
That's
I was just
really
curious.
cool.
Yeah, this is
I'm
this
not
is a
gonna
big
sleep now.
topic, and a lot. I've run across people that really are afraid of death in an active sort of way. It
Mm.
really does color their experience of life because it's something that is so present to them. You know,
Mm.
you would think that, yeah, people of faith that we'd have a more moderated view toward it. But I'll tell you what, and I know I've told you this story before. I don't consider myself afraid of death, and yet at 2:30 in the morning when I woke up with pain in my chest running down my left arm, I'll tell you what, I suddenly realized I'm not ready. I don't want to go now. It was a really interesting feeling when suddenly it was right in front of me. And could this be the moment? And I'm wondering whether to wake up Marion and call 911. And at one point, I did get up and texted my two daughters who don't live with us just to tell them I love them. I didn't let on what was going on, but I just wanted the last thing that they got from me to be that I was thinking of them. I loved them. But I realized, yeah, I don't want to do this. So it changes from just something that's kind of theoretical and out there someplace, or when it becomes possibly really imminent. And,
Mm.
mm,
you know,
mm,
and I suppose, yeah, there was a fear there, and it's a fear that Sarah talks about. We just don't know what's coming. And anybody who tells you that they do has either really drunk the Kool-Aid or they're selling something, because nobody knows, what is coming next. There's a
Mm.
great line, and I know I've told you about this before, that movie Jackie, where the priest is counseling
yes.
Jackie Kennedy, and he says, "I've lived a blessed life, but every night when I get into bed and I get under the covers and I stare off into the dark, I wonder, is this all there is?" And she
Mm,
says, "You wonder?" And he goes, "Every soul on this planet does.
mm,
But then in the morning you wake up and you make up the coffee." And she says, "Why bother? And he says, because you did, and you will do tomorrow. And God, in his infinite wisdom, will make sure that it's just enough for us. That's what it really comes down to. This moment, will we let it be just enough for us? And that's the best that we can possibly do. Ecclesiastes comes to the same conclusion. The best we can do as human beings is simply enjoy our day's work under the sun, enjoy our food and drink, enjoy our spouse and our children. In other words, just let the moment be enough because that's all we've got. We've got this moment and nothing else. And so there is no certainty in any of this. And yet, there are some things that we can start to think about, and this little section here is trying to dig at that there really is no appreciation of life until there is an appreciation of death as well. It's part of the universal pattern, as he's talking about here. Actually, if you think about it, the only thing that really gives life meaning and value to us is that it is finite. It's like anything else, it's supply and demand, right? If we really could live forever, how much would life be worth? It's the fact that it's finite, it's the fact that there's an end date, the fact that we all know that we need to die, that really gives life its cherished value. So there is something about death that we need to incorporate into life and do it in a balanced way because it really will enhance our lives if we can incorporate it in a healthy way into it and come to terms with the uncertainty and the unknown, as Sarah put it, because that's always going to be there. Even if we are totally convinced that human life does not end at death, it continues, we still wonder, how does it continue? My biggest question is, as I continue, will I be known as I am known? Will I know myself? Or like a drop to the ocean, do I just return to the huge collective consciousness? I don't like that idea. I still want to have some individuality. But we don't know that for sure. We don't know how that's going to work. We can say that whatever it is, it's going to be fine. It's just from a human point of view, it's pretty scary. To think that our consciousness, the way we know ourselves, no longer exists. What does that even mean? How do we transcend that? So that all that stuff's built in. And so we take that for granted. But in terms of this moment now and allowing this moment to be enough, how can we incorporate some of what Scripture tells us, some of what the lives of those who have really taken the spiritual journey, what do they tell us about how to incorporate this reality of death into life? And as William was talking about the mini death or the little death, that's what we're doing in contemplation. Contemplation is often called the little death because we're practicing for the moment that we really do leave our egoic consciousness by stepping away from it, over and over and over again, both in our meditational or contemplative prayer, but also just in our mindful presence during the day. Each time, what Jesus says, and if you want to find your life, you have to lose it. Every time we lose ourselves in the moment, we're practicing the little death. That's kind of like the drop returning to the ocean in a way. We're no longer really conscious of ourselves as separate. We're just all connected in that moment, that peak moment that we have. There's no sense of separation. And that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to practice doing, because that's what feels good. That's what really feels purposeful in life, is that kind of deep connection where the boundaries between us and everything else sort of fall away. That's what we're after. And so why would we fear that in actual death if we're really going to move into this boundaryless space where everything is one? And as Jesus said, we're not going to have husbands and wives, but we'll be like the angels in heaven, where everyone is as intimate as a spouse. Everyone is as intimate as a best friend. We won't have tiers of friends. We'll all be connected in such a way. That's what feels good to us even now. Yet we fear it because we just don't know how that's going to be. But we're trying to incorporate some of these, more I suppose, contemplative understandings into our lives so that we can start to relax into it. So let's start back up at the top. I believe that the Christian faith is saying that the pattern of transformation, the pattern that connects, is always death transformed, not death avoided. So what is he actually saying there in the italicized line? Death transformed, not death avoided. In other words, the way that we connect, right, is transformed by death, not transformed by avoiding death. Now, the way our culture works and the way our usual thought process of humans work is that death is a bad thing. Death is the worst thing that can happen to us. Death is the end of life. Look at everybody running around trying to prolong their life. Look at everybody trying to run around pretending that they're not going to die through all the distractions that we do by trying to stay young and look young and do all the things. We have this youth obsessed culture that is completely death avoidant. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. We come up with all these euphemisms for death. He passed away. He graduated. That's the one I really like. He graduated. He went home. I mean, we have all these ways of trying to avoid the fact that he died, you know. And so we are always trying to avoid death, and we think that somehow enhances life. But this pattern that Rohr is talking about, and the ancients had a uh, different perspective and a different experience of life, that they realized that that pattern is transformed through death. Our whole society is built on separating ourselves from the circle of life. We get our meat in neat cellophane wrapped parcels at the supermarket, bloodless and not looking anything like the animal that it came from. We don't want to be reminded of the animal that died, in order to eat what we eat and do what we do. We take our own dead and we cart them away. Other people deal with that and make them look lifelike again if we have an open casket, but more and more we cremate them and everything is sanitized. The ancients, of course, lived close to the ground. They lived that whole cycle. They were hunter-gatherers, and they slaughtered their meat right before they put it into the pot and cooked it and ate it. You know, when their kin died, they died in the home. They were present to that, and so there was this visceral connection, just like, farmers and other people who are living close to the land would also experience. And so it wasn't this huge taboo subject that was always avoided and shelved off, but it was integrated into the way that they lived. We don't do that anymore. And so it's going to be harder for us to be able to come to terms with all of this and realize that, this is a part of life that needs to really be integrated if we're going to be healthy about it. In the subsistence cultures, when a person was old enough that they couldn't chew the leather anymore, as um, what was that actor's name, the way he put it? Anyway, they would take their walkabout. When they couldn't contribute to the tribe anymore, when they could not contribute to the family, they had to exit so that they weren't taking resources away from the young people and the folks that really needed it. And so there was this practice of just understanding, yeah, the death was purposeful in that sense because it allowed the family, the tribe to survive. And we have all sorts of taboos around that stuff. So there's this very different way of looking at death that we have culturally here. We're always trying to avoid it. And the church hasn't been a whole lot of help. Even though we talk about heaven and we talk about these things, at the same time, culturally, the church is more about prosperity and health and wealth and all the same things that mirrors our culture, and has not really helped us to integrate death into life, continues to be death avoidant. So the pattern that connects is always death transformed, not death avoided. We have to experience it. We have to be at one with it. We have to integrate it. The universal pattern is death and resurrection. We all want to focus on the resurrection part, but we're not too keen on focusing on the death part. But without the death, there is no resurrection. Without the, what does he say? Loss and renewal. Without the loss, there is no renewal, he says. One of Jesus' parables was about the grain. Unless it falls and dies in the earth, it can't grow and fulfill its purpose. So that death is part of it, the descent before the ascent that we're always talking about. That would be the little death or the mini death that William was talking about before we can ascend on the other side, is always, always front and center in this pattern that moves over and over again. And not just in Christian tradition, all traditions, right? And he says that's always a disappointment to humans because we want one without the other, don't we? We want to avoid death. But transformation without free, we want transformation without free choice or any surrendering to it. That seemed a little strange to me, his use of free choice there. I don't know if it hit you the same way. He says it's a disappointment to humans because we want one without the other. We want the transformation, but without the free choice or any surrendering to it. Free choice is essential, and we've talked about that. It's essential to love and whatnot. But I think what he's talking about here is we would like it to be passive and not active. We would like to have everything taken care of for us rather than we having to actively choose, right? Without we having to actively surrender ourselves to some of these concepts. In other words, just as Sarah was saying, we want certainty. We don't want risk. When we don't want the responsibility that comes with the choices that we need to make if we're really going to advance along this path of transformation. Okay, I just did a lot of talking. Did that stir up anything with any of you?
I enjoyed it, but can we dig into the free choice?
Sure.
And that sentence, it's not vibrating with me for some reason.
Yeah, it didn't vibrate with me either, William. Can you pinpoint what's bugging you about it?
I just don't know what the hell it means.
Okay.
That is always a disappointment to humans because we want one without the other. Transformation without free choice or any surrendering.
So if we go back to what he was saying earlier, he says the universal pattern is death and resurrection, loss and renewal. What we want is the right side of that equation, right? We want the resurrection and the renewal, but we don't want the death or the loss. And remember, this whole section is about suffering, right? What was it? Suffering and what? I'm forgetting that.
Suffering and surrender.
Suffering and surrender. So this whole section is going to be along these lines. So we want the resurrection and the renewal, but we don't want the death. We don't want the loss. We want one without the other. We want transformation without free choice or any surrendering to it. So like I said, I really kind of I got stopped by the free choice part because I see that as an absolute essential and a positive, and he's putting it in the negative category. So how does that work? And like I said, the best I could come up with is we want a passive way through. We want all the work done for us. We don't want to have to make our own active choices along these lines. And we certainly don't want to have to surrender. We want to stay in control. We want to have as much certainty as possible. We want to minimize risk. And we also want to minimize our own responsibility because we want someone to just guarantee that we're going to get it all right. And we're not going to make any mistakes, right? So that's all on the negative side of the ledger. And I think that's what he is equating with free choice. That represents our responsibility, our need to actively move in that direction. We can't just relegate it. We can't pray it away. We can't just come under the blood covering of the cross and say it's all taken care of. We're going to actually have to make some choices, make some steps along the way. And I think that's what he's referring to here. And that's kind of the best I can do. I wouldn't have personally used free choice, and if I'm understanding this correctly. If Richard were here, he could explain it better, and maybe I'd totally agree with him. But there's no answer key in my book, so I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing the best I can here.
Dave, if you skip the whole next paragraph and go to the paragraph that starts with each time we surrender.
Okay.
it says each time we trust the dying, we are led to a deeper level. Trust is free choice. So you can link the trust to the free choice paragraph above it.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how you link it, but I just noticed that he's talking about trusting the process of the dying. Then we're led to a deeper level. How does that link then with transformation without free choice? But I saw the link between the two.
I can.
Yeah, that helps, I think. But trust is making the free choice to actually experience the trustworthiness or lack of it in someone or something. The only way that we are going to trust is because we've experienced trustworthiness, from the chair that you're sitting in to the person that you married and everything in between. The only way we will trust something is if we've experienced that trust. That takes an actual free choice. We have to choose to be in proximity or relationship enough to have discerned whether something is trustworthy. And that takes willpower. We have to actually do it, which means we have to accept the risk that it's not trustworthy and what that may be doing to us in the short term, right? So we have to risk something. We have to actually put something out there of value and risk losing it in order to have this transformation we're talking about. We want the transformation, but we want it passively and we want it with certainty. We don't want to risk anything, and we don't have to make our own choices that are risky choices that may end up being wrong choices. So I think that's where he's going with this. We want one without the other. We want the transformation, but we don't want to take any risks, and we certainly don't want to risk making any bad choices. Is that starting to help put it into some kind of thing? Right.
That makes a lot more sense to me too. I think like choosing to surrender, choosing to allow something to happen is necessary. Otherwise, it's just resistance, and transformation can't take place with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to comment to what you said maybe 10 minutes ago. Okay, I know this is about death, transformation. It's our spiritual sense of transformation. But it popped in my head when you said, oh yeah, we want to avoid death, we exercise, we do this, or I don't know what the other things that you said, but the one that stood out to me is exercise. Okay, so in my family we have chronic illnesses, one of which is diabetes and high blood pressure. I exercise not to, because you said to avoid death. It's not to avoid death.
Well, I never actually mentioned exercise, but make your point anyway.
Okay, my point
being, for the record, let you know.
Okay, not to avoid death. We do these things not to avoid death, but it's like, if I'm going to have diabetes, because it runs my family, or high blood pressure, I'd rather I have it when I'm 88 years old, 95 years old, rather than when I'm in my 60s. Second, I want my joints to be as supple as it can be, because it's what you call to the suffering. I do not want to have all these achy joints when I'm 55, 65. I'd rather it starts when I'm 80. It's like kind of delaying the onset. That way I don't have as much suffering. And my dementia, if it comes, like my dad also cannot do this now, and I'm helping him, but he's 90. He's going to be 91. I mean, to have, and he has high, what do you call it, hemoglobin A1C. He doesn't have, quote, diabetes yet, but to have, you can eat anything now. You know what I mean? Like, don't worry about it. But to have it delayed, that way you have as much health as possible, not to avoid death, but to delay the suffering or lessen the
all I can say,
duration.
but if it's not a problem, it's not a problem.
So you want quality over quantity, is what you're saying, right?
She wants both.
She wants both.
Right, but I mean, you want quality.
Quality
of her quantity.
Yeah, I mean,
Quantity.
the bottom line is that we can live to be 120, or we can live to be 20.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is we're not gonna be here forever on this earth, in this body. But I agree with you. I mean, there's steps you can take, diet wise, to reverse type 2 diabetes. You know what I mean?
So what we're talking about, if what you are doing is simply being healthy and taking self-care. I mean, obviously, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
I was
it's
talking
about
about
quality.
those practices which are death avoidant, and there's tons of them in our society. Our society is death avoidant. We secret it away. We don't talk about it, and we try to look young and just pretend, that we're going to just keep on living. But
Mm.
we need to integrate it. That doesn't mean that you don't exercise and diet correctly and take care of yourself, because obviously, for all the reasons you just stated, Ellen, it makes perfect sense. But you're still going to die. I mean, I
Mm.
don't care how much you exercise or diet, you're still going to die. It always would strike me when someone said, "Yeah, they beat cancer, but they're still going to die." You know, so, okay, you got a stay of execution, but you're still going to die. There is no way around that, and it's going to happen. And so it's something that we need to integrate more into our lives and find a way to live peacefully, more peacefully at least, with the uncertainty. If we can't make friends with uncertainty, our lives are always going to be compromised. I mean, psychologists tell you that all negative pathologies in human life stem from an intolerance of uncertainty. If we can't tolerate uncertainty, we're going to have to invent all sorts of ways to paper over that. Once we can start to make friends with uncertainty, not just make friends with it, but actually see it as the spice of life. It's what makes life interesting, is the uncertainty. If we had it all figured out, how interested would you be in life? It's like, how many of you really enjoy playing tic-tac-toe anymore? I mean, that was good for about 5 minutes when you were a kid, but after a while, it doesn't hold any interest anymore. You know, that's why a game like golf is perfect, because it's just hard enough, right? You have a
Messes with
good day and you go buy a new bag of clubs and you think you're Jack Nicklaus, and then reality sets back in.
Well, we honor the dead, we do, and particularly, I mean, yes, we're death adverse, I think, in this culture, truly. But then when people are older, how do we feel when they pass? I mean, we always say things like, well, they lived a full life and they had a wonderful, long, beautiful life. Look at all the things they've done or the family they've left behind. It's, I think, when people die unexpectedly at a younger age, we're more shocked and we're surprised and we're upset, and it throws off the curve, kind of a thing. But I mean, you're right. We're death adverse, but we still honor it, kind of at the same. I mean, we're surrendering to it when the older person who's 95 passes away. You sort of just say, okay, they went to sleep and they lived a wonderful life, and how much more can they take? You know,
Right.
I mean, my mother is at that stage now. She's almost 94, and she just says, I could go any day now and I would be perfectly happy. She would be perfectly happy. She's happy. She's lived her life. She's not jumping out of airplanes or doing anything like that anymore, but she's just living, it's just more of the same for her. So she's ready, kind of. So we
And
want
your
to be
mother,
happy for her when she goes, if hopefully
yeah.
it's not tragic and those kinds of things, but you wish for that.
Mm.
Well, and I tell you this all the time, Kathy, you're such a good daughter. I mean, you really do honor your mother and your father, and you do honor your elders. But look at our society in general. We don't honor our elders, not like an Asian society does. My gosh, we send them away. It's kind of criminal the way we treat our elders, both from a healthcare perspective and from every other perspective. And in this youth obsessed culture, as soon as you're a certain age, man, you become invisible pretty much. You don't think there's ageism out there?
Oh,
Oh my
sure.
gosh. Try to
Yes.
try to get a job at our age and see how you do. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really, really pronounced. And that's all a part of this death avoidant culture that we have. So what we're saying is, as contemplatives, it's something that we need to integrate. And we're going to have a further way to go to do that because of the culture in which we live and the time in which we live. So we've got some ground that we're going to have to cover to, as an individual, be able to integrate this in a way that's healthy, in a way that allows us to really live and enjoy life, because we've integrated the big part of life, which is death. You know, Francis of Assisi did this in his Canticle to the Sun. Remember when he talks about sister death and talks about death, anthropomorphized as feminine, but as this necessary and beautiful part of life. And so if we can't do that, it is going to compromise our experience of life. And it's going to make us non-present. That's the other thing. We can't really be present if we're so afraid of death. We're not going to be able to be present to the suffering of life. We're not going to be able to be present to our own suffering because that just brings us too close. There's this phrase called mortality salience that they were always talking about in the chaplaincy instruction that I went through. And that just means how prominent is death in your thinking? How high profile is it in your thinking? And of course, it always jumps up whenever you experience a death or a loss yourself. When you see a car wreck or whatever, then your own mortality salience goes up through the roof. And you're trying to deal with that. And that's part of the angst of the grief that you feel if it's someone that you've lost, because it's also bringing up your own fear of death. And so, there's some of that going on at the same time that you're grieving the loss of your loved one. When some of these crazy news stories come through, whatever the story may be, that's heightening our mortality salience as well. And that's a very uncomfortable thing. But it's what's absolutely necessary for us if we're going to be serious about our spiritual formation, is to integrate this and see how it is a beautiful part of the entire pattern of life and a necessary part as well. And we won't be suffering so much because of it if we do start to actually surrender to it and to integrate it. Let's see. We ordinarily learn to submit and surrender to this scary pattern because reality demands it of us, right? I mean, that's the truth. The more we live, the more we're going to see. I mean, it is odd for me to be this age and watching people my age and younger, getting ill, getting cancer, dying. I mean, I always remember older people, especially like Marion's parents, when they moved to Cherry Valley 30 years ago, there was a vibrant German community because they come from Yugoslavia and Austria. Vibrant German-speaking German community. They all got together for dinners and dances and were, passing on German culture to the next generation. They're all gone. It's like John and Kathy are the last two left standing. They were on the board of this thing. All their friends are gone. And they're feeling so much more alone now. He's 92, of course, and so his mortality salience is through the roof. And he doesn't seem to be as calm about it, Kathy, as your mom is, But he's ready. He says he's ready. And got to have a cigar with him on Thanksgiving, and we just sat out there and talked. And he's never going to move from that property that he lives on. He's going to die there, and but. This idea of mortality salience is a big one. We don't want it to be a negative. We want it to end up being a positive in our life, adding value, more presence to life. So we submit to it and surrender to it because reality demands it. The more you live, especially, the more it becomes real to you. The more you realize that you're closer to death than you were to your birth. Christians are helped by the fact that Jesus literally submitted to it and came out more than okay. So he's our guide, our pioneer and perfecter of our faith, as the letter to the Hebrews puts it. Each time we surrender, each time we trust the dying, we are led to a deeper level. Okay, now this is that little death we're talking about, that egoic death, stepping away from it. So each time we surrender, each time we trust the dying, we are led to a deeper level. So this is more spiritual and metaphorical than it is literal, obviously. I suppose unless you've had a near-death experience like Brady or Patricia, then you've actually had a more literal experience of it. But each time that we allow ourselves to fall into this place of choiceless awareness, or maybe each time we allow ourselves really to be present to someone who is dying, either in a hospital visit or in our own family or someone who is on hospice. Obviously, Kathy, this has got to be doing a number on you, being with your mother as much as you are. and watching her enter the last stage of her life, it's got to be working you and raising your mortality salience and causing you to need to deal with it and as you watch it go through. So that surrender to the process that you're going through, Kathy, I think is also what he's talking about here. But we all have our stories. We all know this. I mean, I was present right before Bob Lang died with Anne and Fiona, and I was there the night before, and I was there the morning right after. I mean, going through an experience like that with the family and watching my friend, in a state that I couldn't have imagined when I first met him, as vibrant as he was just a few years ago. It it's a surrender. You do allow yourself to be present. What's the alternative? If it's too scary for you, then you just can't be there. You won't go at all, or you'll keep yourself really shelved off and distracted because you can't allow yourself to really be fully present. You can't allow that in. It's just too frightening, which means you miss. You want to talk about stuff that you miss, Judy, being left out of? You'll miss all of that because you can't be present to it. It's just too frightening. And we want to be able to be present to the richness of all of these human experiences that we are present to, uh, because that's what life is all about. And the ability to just be present to someone else at the time of their loss is a huge gift as well. But we can't do it if we're too afraid and we haven't let the pattern really integrate with us. He says we're grounded for a while like an electric wire. So there's less resistance and more available energy to trust it the next time, yet it is still invariably a leap of faith, a walk through some degree of darkness. And it will always be that way. You never get it figured out. As much as you can be convinced, you know, like George, so convinced that death is not the end of human existence and it's going to be all right. We'd probably all agree that we believe that. And yet, when we're faced with it, when it comes right down to it, there's still going to be that sense of a leap into the abyss because we don't really know. We can't know. And that's what also makes life precious and worth living and purposeful because it has to be lived by faith, which is acting and choosing as if. And there's going to be no certainty, only conviction, and conviction is good, but it's still not certainty. There is something essential that we only know by dying. And that doesn't mean your physical death. It means every time that we submit, every time we surrender, every time we lose ourselves in the moment, lose our lives so that we can find them. Every time we go into a centering prayer or a meditational sit and actually move aside into choiceless awareness, all of those moments are moments of dying, stepping away from what the mind sees as its certainty and stepping into a more expansive space. And there's something that we learn by that, and you can't know it any other way. And each time you do it over and over again, you're taking one of those circular journeys where you come back to where you started and you know the place a little better each time. We really don't know what life is until we know what death is. Divine life is so big, so deep, and so indestructible that it is able to include death. In fact, it must and does include death. So, are you buying what he's selling?
Makes a lot of sense. It's true. What he's saying. It really is. We were born into this world and we know we're going to exit out. So, like you said, live in the moment as much as you can. That's all we really have.
I remember reading a novel. It was a science fiction. I can't even remember. Oh, it's Gateway. That's right. That doesn't matter. But I remember the main character, just contemplating his death as he was making this risky decision. And his reasoning was kind of like what you said, Judy. He just said, the thought of everybody going on and living their lives and eating and drinking and making love and making babies, and I'm not there. I'm not part of it. He said, I just can't get my arms around it, you know? And I think that's it. The way you put it, Judy, the way he put it, it's the same thing. Everybody's going to go on and you can't be a part of it anymore. And that's hard. What will you be a part of? I mean, we don't know, and that's the rub, right? And just like Shakespeare said, Sarah brought up Shakespeare. I was thinking of Hamlet's soliloquy, to die, to rest, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. What will I be conscious to, conscious of? And we just don't know. The uncertainty gets us every time.
It sounds nice to say that death is a part of life. It sounds like it's going to be this smooth little blip of a transition and we'll just be into death. But I guess in our culture, it's such a big transition when you lose someone and when we have to let go and they have to let go. It's so dramatic. And, it would be nice if it was smoother. It's just like, oh, you just blinked and you're gone, you're where you need to be and everybody's okay. But it's never that simple. There's always the loss and the surrender and the grief and where are they and why can't they come back and tell us where they are and what are they missing? And it's just drama.
Yeah. I've had many people tell me that it's not death they're afraid of, it's the pain they're afraid of, whatever pain there would be associated with their death. And I get that too. That makes sense.
Also, yeah, I'm also afraid of a painful death, but it's also for me, it's the stage of my life. When my girls were way, way younger, I'm saying, no, I cannot die. There's no surrendering to this. I will make sure I don't die. But as they become young adults, my obligation to them as the mother, I still don't want to die. I'm still too young. But I have that assurance that they can now more take care of themselves. They don't need this mother. They're not 5, 10-year-olds. That helps. If I die tomorrow, that helps.
Mm-hmm. Whenever I do something that I know irritates Marian, I'll look at her and say, you're going to miss me when I'm gone. And she invariably says, nope, I'm going first.
We think about control so much. And I keep thinking about this one line in this movie, The Help, at the end when the daughter is talking to the mother and she has cancer and she's been ailing from that. And the daughter says, I can't leave you like this. And her mother just turns to her and says, it's okay. I've decided not to die. Don't worry. I've just decided not to die. Now there's a woman that has control. Or she does anyway.
Love that movie.
We can only wish.
Yeah, I think your point about the pain, I think if I have my preference, feel this way, I I do have some fear of a chronic period of suffering that is very painful, whether it's through cancer or you know, uh, God knows, disabilities that have gotten the best of you. You know, Lou Gehrig's disease and Alzheimer's. You're thinking of Linda too. And I know for me, I think this discussion has helped me realize that, and I'm a little embarrassed to say this, that I'm struggling to keep visiting Linda where she is. And maybe this is helping me kind of come to terms with what that's about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to reconcile, I think, for me. When I see someone that has, lost some of her gifts and her faculties and has had a series of losses. Um, So, and Nina too, and even Scott, not to say you're dying, but you're certainly having your share of chronic pain. So I really, I champion all of those that are able to still be present too. And I want to build up my strength, I think, in being able to do that.
That would be
Appreciate the
well,
discussion.
and the work you're doing with Anne, Judy, is great.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
fact that you're so present to her and working with her and everything. Yes, she's in a very different situation than Linda, obviously,
Yeah, very much so.
but it's still part of that process. So it's just something that we need to become more aware of. We need to integrate it in some way. We don't get morbid about it. It's not something that's always on our mind, but it's something that is deeply integrated into the shape of our journey. We realize it is always the descent before the ascent. And we're going to keep cycling through that shape. And each descent is a little death. And it's a practice for the big death. But again, without the big death, there is no graduation to whatever is next. There is no resurrection unless there's death. And unless the seed dies, it doesn't fulfill its purpose as actually becoming a flowering plant of some sort. And so this is part of it. It's a necessary process, and it's a beautiful part of it if we will let it be. But we can fear it and we can avoid it and we can keep pushing it off. But in doing that, we're compromising not only our life and our moments, but also our ability to really become fully spiritually formed. And that's why we're here. And so it's something that we need to come to terms with and do the best that we can.
Okay.
So, all right. And
Thank
it's time for William to go to bed.
you. Yes.
Good discussion, everyone.
Right behind you, William.
Yeah. This was a really good discussion. Thanks everyone for being so open and transparent about this because it's good stuff. All right, Scotty.
Father God, we're grateful to be here and we're grateful that you're here. And to be present, to exist, to be connected, all those attributes or feelings or whatever they're called is an amazing part of our journey. It's incredible what we're going to go through and what we are going through, and death will be part of the process. And different people give different definitions to death, but your definition is the one that matters, and it's pretty evident when we look around and we see stars in the heavens and the vast array of space and constellations and what we call infinity. It's just, how can we doubt that there's something more and something to this death thing, that we must walk through death's door at some point, what shape it takes or what it holds for each one of us, we don't know, but we know there's something. Things keep going, and we're grateful that you're in charge because you've done a pretty good job so far. I hate to have to try and put all this together and keep everything running. So thank you, Lord, that you love us enough to take care of the fine details of our lives. And let us just keep focused on you and your drawing by your Holy Spirit as we move forward into what comes next. And we love you, Lord, and we're grateful for everything you're doing for us. It's in your precious name, Lord Jesus, that we give our thanks and say our prayers and say our amens. Amen.
Amen.
Man.
Amen.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great
Thanks,
rest of your
Dave.
week. See you Sunday. Sunday.
Love you guys.
Happy
Kathy.
Sunday.
Love you too, Judy.
Love you,
Thanks,
Good
guys.
night, Ken. Thanks for being here, Ken.
Night.
Good night, guys. See you, Georgie.
Good night,
Bye,
John Boy.
George. Bye, Scott. And Jordana.
See you Sunday.
See you Sunday, sweetie.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.